on the West Coast, and welcome to the first of our 3 webinars designed especially for board members and executives of not-for-profit organizations. We are KLR, a regional professional services firm with offices in Providence, Rhode Island, Boston and Waltham, Massachusetts, and Newport, Rhode Island. My name is Frank Monty. Having trouble getting the slides to move. As I said, my name is Frank Monty, and I am the director of the KLR Not-for-Profit Services Group. And today, our topic is the 10 basic responsibilities of nonprofit boards. We will talk at the end of today's session about individual board member responsibilities. However, the majority of our program is devoted to the responsibilities of the board as a unit. While boards are comprised of individuals, what we want to focus on are the responsibilities of the entity that we call the nonprofit board. At the end of the session, when we review individual board member responsibilities, you will see that they are very similar to the responsibilities of the board, as the actions of the board are, of course, heavily dependent on the actions of the individual. But keep in mind that it is possible to have a dysfunctional group even though each of the individual members of the group are functional. So it is this group dynamic on which we will focus much of our efforts today. One of the difficulties of volunteering with a nonprofit organization is that there are any number of misconceptions and misunderstandings about what nonprofit organizations are and how they function. Today, one of our objectives is to reduce these ambiguities and refocus your thoughts and ideas about board service. We will start with 5 assumptions. Every organization is unique, and you will be tempted to say to yourself that this is or this does not apply to my board and my organization. And you may be right in certain circumstances or for certain points that we discussed today. But try to focus on the fundamental concepts as they hold true for most organizations. The concepts we will discuss today will vary as to their applicability to each organization depending on the size of the organization, the structure of the board, the history of the organization, and other factors. But even with all of the variety of organizations, time has proven that certain structures, policies, and practices work better than others. The other fact to keep in mind is that your organization is in a continual state of evolution. So while some of what we talk about today may not be completely applicable to you today, it may be something to keep in the back of your mind as your organization evolves. The cornerstone of effective organizations is a board and management that understand their respective roles. When each group is performing their responsibilities and not trampling in each other's garden, the organization benefits. Of course, I realize that some of you listening to this webinar are from small organizations that have no paid staff at all, and that is okay. This session is suitable for you just as it is for the well-established organization with hundreds of employees. What you need to realize when you are involved in a small organization with no staff is that you are actually performing 2 jobs. You're performing the job of the staff and you're performing the job of the board. I suggest that each board meeting be physically split into 2 meetings, one for board business and one for staff business. I was once the president of the Attleboro Historic Preservation Society, a small preservation society in my hometown of Attleboro, Massachusetts. And we had no staff. We had a building that the city had leased to us for $1 a year. And our goal was to restore that building and then build a functioning preservation society for the community. What I did at board meetings was I presided over the first part of the board meeting where we talked about governance items, mission items, and the things we're going to talk about today. And then I turned the board meeting over to another member of the board who had a great deal of construction experience, the former owner of a construction company. And he ran the staff part of the meeting where we talked about the tasks at hand in restoring the building and getting the Preservation Society to work in the community. So this separating our board meetings into 2 board meetings really made it clear to all of the board members that they were involved in two jobs, and they had two different responsibilities for those two jobs. So without further ado, let's get into the 10 basic responsibilities. Here are the first 5 of the 10 basic responsibilities of nonprofit boards. What we're going to do is to spend a couple of minutes discussing each one. Now here's a question coming in. The question is, how did you arrive at this list? Well, I've been involved in nonprofit organizations since 1981, so that's about 30 years ago. And in my practice of providing professional services to nonprofit organizations, I've read a great deal of articles and books on the nonprofit organization and board responsibilities. And although the writing, among all the things I've read, varies, certain subjects or topics kept appearing, so that over time this list of 10 basic responsibilities evolved. For example, if you studied 20 books on how to be a success in business, you would read about 100 plus or minus things to do, but you soon would develop a short list of 10 items that appeared in a majority of the books you were studying on how to be a success in business. Responsibility number 1, determine the organization's mission and purpose. This is not just the first responsibility, but it is the primary responsibility of a nonprofit board member. The mission of an organization is its reason for being. It is the reason why the IRS has awarded it tax-exempt status. Let's take a little tangent for a minute and talk about tax-exempt status. Tax-exempt status means that this business, this nonprofit organization, is paying no federal or state income tax. If you think about this and realize that the activities of the federal and state governments are paid for by income taxes, you quickly see that for every tax-exempt organization, for every business that is exempt from paying taxes, the rest of us individuals and citizens must make up that deficiency. So we as citizens are personally subsidizing tax-exempt organizations by paying more tax than we would otherwise need to if these organizations were not tax-exempt. When we as citizens told Congress to create the tax-exempt section of the Internal Revenue Code, we said that this status would only apply to organizations engaged in certain activities. Therefore, the second bullet there that talks about the commitment to the organization's mission drives the board's sense of public accountability. What we said to Congress when we asked Congress to create this tax-exempt section of the Internal Revenue Code is that these tax-exempt entities should be run by volunteer boards, representatives of the community. And their job as a representative of the community is to make sure that the organization stays true to its mission and purpose. The mission and purpose of an organization serve as the guide to the organization's planning. Everything they plan, everything they undertake, everything that they do should be towards achieving the mission of the organization. The second basic responsibility of the board is to select the CEO. Here is where we separate board work from the day-to-day job of implementing activities that are aimed at accomplishing the organization's mission. The board should agree on what skills and characteristics, traits, personality, etc. that they are looking for in a CEO, and then they should conduct a search for the most qualified person to fill those requirements. The third of the 10 basic responsibilities is to provide proper financial oversight. Providing financial oversight means developing a budget and assuring that operational controls are in place. The annual budget is the mechanism that sets into motion the programmatic and personnel expenditures that are aimed at achieving the organization's mission. Therefore, the budget is one of the board's most significant policy decisions, because until you commit to spend the money and put actions into motion, addressing the mission is only a dream. For example, when you set out to drive someplace, you actually create a plan, and we either do this consciously or unconsciously. As you set out on the journey, you are continually getting feedback via where you are along the route, what time it is, how much traffic you are encountering, etc. This same thing must happen in business, and this is called monitoring the budget. Comparing the budget to the actual results via periodic financial and other reports that you receive on a timely basis so that you can make changes where necessary. On vacation, you take precautions to make sure you do not spend all of your money on the first day. And in business, you need these same cash management controls to make sure that you don't spend all of your resources too early in the year. Now, because you're getting most of this information from the Chief Financial Officer of the organization, you need to monitor and understand the performance of the CFO so that you develop confidence in the person who is giving you information on which you are making decisions. Responsibility number 4 is to ensure that the organization has adequate resources to operate and to achieve its goals. Now, this does not mean that board members are personally responsible for the financial health of the organization and must make large donations. One of the things that I know is happening in the not-for-profit world is that some boards impose a financial responsibility on each board member, saying that each board member must donate a minimum of $1,000 a year or $5,000 a year or $10,000 a year to the organizations on which they are a board member. Some organizations water this down a bit by saying the individual board member has a responsibility to either donate X thousands of dollars to the organization or to obtain that level of resources from other areas. So perhaps they get their corporation or another business or another benefactor in the community to donate, but they take personal responsibility for raising that much money. Personally, I do not believe that this kind of a requirement on board members is appropriate because, as we talked about earlier, the first responsibility of the board is to make sure the organization sticks to its mission. When I believe that when you put a financial responsibility like that on board members, that becomes the primary thing each board member is concerned about, and they take their eye off their first responsibility of making sure the organization sticks true to the mission. So what do we mean by saying that board members must ensure that the organization gets adequate resources? It means that board members should lead the fundraising task. First, of course, you should contribute to the extent you can, meaning that once you join a board, you should look at your donation budget in your life and make room in that donation budget for the organization on which you are a board member. It only makes sense to me that if you have in your annual budget, if you're donating $1,000 a year or if you're donating $100 a year to various not-for-profit organizations, all of those organizations you were previously supporting are organizations which you know less about than the organization on which you are a board member. So it only makes sense to me that if you're a board member of ABC organization, you're going to financially support ABC organization. Now, I'm not saying that you need to take your $100 or $1,000 annual donation budget and double it so that you can give $100 or $1,000 to the organization on which you're a board member, but you should take that $100 or $1,000 budget and give some of that to the organization on which you are a board member. If you can't expand your donation budget, then what you need to do is to reduce the amount you're giving to the organizations you're not serving as a board member and give something to the organization that you are a board member of. Full board participation in the financial support area is a powerful message to the rest of the community. Leadership is doing what I do, which is very different from doing what I say to do. So it's very important that when an organization is out there raising money, the organization can say that we have received 100% participation in the fundraising effort by our board. When we talk about leading the fundraising task, it means being a spokesperson for the organization. You want to bring your knowledge of the organization and your passion for the mission to the attention of resource providers, and your actions will encourage their support. Everyone you know should know you are a board member. Remember, board service is not an obituary builder. When you pass away, and whoever knows you enough to read your obituary, they should not be surprised to learn you are a board member of ABC organization. They should know you are a board member of ABC organization because you're always talking about how honored you are to be a board member because this organization is doing such good things for the community, how important this organization is for the community, and how this organization deserves the support of everyone in the community, including the people you're talking to. The other thing you want to do as a board member is to personally thank resource providers for their support. This is kind of the same way that a restaurant owner comes out of the kitchen and thanks you for coming into their restaurant. As a board member, you want to maintain relationships after receiving a donation. A person who has made a donation to your nonprofit organization has demonstrated some interest in the organization, and you as a board member want to feed that interest with continual information about the organization. At our third webinar in this series, we will dig much deeper into the fundraising responsibilities of board members, so I encourage you to watch the KLR website and sign up for the webinar on fundraising responsibilities of nonprofit boards. Ensuring that the organization has the appropriate legal and ethical integrity and maintains accountability to the community is the fifth basic responsibility of the nonprofit board. The reputation of any business is its greatest asset. If anything, this is more true for the nonprofit business. In addition, because the nonprofit organization's mission is its attention to a societal need, behaving in a legal and ethical manner is very, very important. It is a breach of the public trust if a fraud or embezzlement occurs at a nonprofit organization. Those of us paying more taxes because the nonprofit entity is tax exempt are deeply disappointed when these organizations fail to live up to the highest standards of the community they serve. The board should take steps to assure that the organization is always accountable to the community, even going beyond what is minimally required in this area. Planning. Planning is the sixth basic responsibility for nonprofit boards, ensuring that the organization engages in planning. As the expression goes, those who fail to plan are planning to fail. I know this is not the first time you've heard this, and it certainly applies to not-for-profit organizations just as it applies to your personal life and your business life. The board of the nonprofit organization must take steps to make sure that the activities of the nonprofit organization are adequately planned and that the organization monitors its performance against the plan. The planning process is where the mission of the organization is turned into objectives and goals that can be measured and accomplished. It is not the board's responsibility to develop the plans or to implement the plans. Rather, the board will have fulfilled a very important role in asking good questions and demanding good answers, offering suggestions and alternatives, being a sounding board for the staff's questions and concerns, etc. One of the things that you need to do when you are a board member is to realize that your job is not one of getting involved and doing the detail. Your job is one of being management, senior management, and that is mostly making sure people do their job and challenging those people when they develop plans or assumptions, and challenging where those assumptions came from and how sound those assumptions are and how good those plans are. This is a task that is not easy for those of us who are not already functioning in a management job. As a matter of fact, one of the main difficulties that all employees face is when they first start in any position in any company, they're one of the doers. And if they eventually get promoted into management, they have to stop being one of the doers and start being one of the managers. And people in general have a difficult time avoiding the detail and getting involved in only management, because your sense of satisfaction when you were a doer is much more satisfied than when you are just directing other people to accomplish something. So imagine the manager of a baseball team versus the players on the field. Who gets a greater satisfaction from winning a game? Probably the players on the field who made the catches, made the hits, scored the runs, etc. Yet the manager plays a very important role in the success of the team, and that's what you all are as board members. You are managers as opposed to players. While we're on the planning function, one of the things that I have found that very successful in many of my clients is the development of committees on the board of directors, where the committees handle more of the detail. And those committees, when they're populated by people who are not board members, it serves a couple of functions. If you are a board member and you're already committed to attending 6 to 10 meetings a year, or maybe even 12 meetings a year, asking that you be on a board, on a committee of the board that meets another 6 or 8 times a year may be too much. So we can have the board perform much better if we recruit non-board members to be on committees, and then have only one board member be required to serve as the liaison to that committee. So for example, I think every organization should have a finance committee that looks into the finances of the organization much more thoroughly than is possible to do during a regular board meeting. The finance committee could be populated by volunteers drawn from the CPA organizations, maybe an person with insurance experience, a person with banking experience. Those type of people could be on the finance committee. They do not have to attend board meetings. They only need to attend the finance committee. And one member of the board, usually the treasurer, will attend that board meeting, that finance committee meeting, and then bring the recommendations of the finance committee back to the organization. So you can have finance committees, you can have development committees who talk about fundraising, you could have personnel committees that handle the human resource questions of the organization. So you can have any number of various committees. There's a question coming in. The question is, in a nonprofit, are committee members who are not board members protected under state law from liability? This is an excellent question. I don't believe that the state law that limits the liability of board members extends to committees. But as I think about this, I don't imagine that a committee member has any liability, because a committee member is not making any decisions. The job of the committee is to make recommendations to the board, which are passed to the board through the board liaison on the committee, and it is the board that makes the decision. So the board is the only group, and board members are the only individuals with a liability issue because they are the ones making decisions. Since committee members are not making decisions but are only making recommendations, I don't believe they have a liability. But that is a question you may want to ask the organization's lawyer or the organization's insurance person if you opt to go this committee route. The seventh basic responsibility of nonprofit boards is to recruit new board members and assess board performance. Serving on a board is not a lifetime commitment. As a matter of fact, the failure to inject new blood into a board is usually problematic. Therefore, one of the responsibilities of the board is to provide for its own continuation and evolution. Recruiting and orienting new board members is a key responsibility of the nonprofit board and the health of that board. To do this well, the board should be continually assessing its needs relative to board member experience, skills, influence, etc. Part of the board growth process is a formal performance assessment of itself prepared on a periodic basis. The board should meet with the sole purpose of assessing its performance, and we usually recommend doing this every 3 to 5 years. In addition, a mechanism should be in place to periodically assess the performance of individual board members. Re-election or reappointment to the board should not be automatic. Many people advocate that board members have specific terms and that the number of terms a person can serve also be limited. So, for example, a board member may be elected to a board for a period of 3 years, and then the board would also have a policy that says board members cannot serve more than 2 or 3 3-year terms without taking a leave of absence for at least 1 term, meaning a leave of absence for 3 years. This provides you with the opportunity of weeding out underperforming board members by just not reappointing them for another term, and it makes sure that the board continually has new blood by putting an upper limit on the number of terms that can be served before the person has to rotate off. The 8th basic responsibility is to enhance the organization's public standing. Remember, the board is the representative of the organization to the community, as well as the community's management of the organization. As I said earlier, everyone you know should know that you are a board member of ABC organization because you are constantly representing that organization to the community. The organization is serving the community, and you want the community to know that. In addition, the organization needs the support of the community to continue to serve it. These 2 things happen best when board members are public ambassadors for the organization. Remember, no one interested enough to read your obituary should be surprised to learn that you are a member of a nonprofit board. One of the questions that usually comes up when we talk about the public standing of an organization is who should be the organization's spokesperson. Ideally, a member of the board should be the spokesperson for an organization. However, in certain organizations, such as nonprofit environmental organizations, the information being communicated to the public is so technical that the CEO may be the more credible spokesperson for the organization. Another concept to keep in mind when we talk about the enhancing the public standing of the organization, when an organization has public events, whether those are fundraising events or whether those are press releases and things, the more board members that can attend those functions, that can just be present with a name tag on that says board member, that speaks volumes to the community. It tells the community that the volunteer members of the community who are making sure this organization serves the community well are interested enough to be in attendance at the fundraising functions or at the other public affairs of the organization, and they are wearing their badge indicating that they are board members so that members of the public can go up and talk to them. So I encourage all of you, when you join a board, to realize that you're also making a commitment to be there representing the community in all of the public affairs of the organization. Number 9, determine, monitor, and strengthen the organization's programs and services. What I like to say is that your overall objective when joining a board is that you want to leave the organization in better shape than you found it. So when you first join an organization, you want to learn about the organization's mission and purpose. You want to quickly understand its finances. And you then want to turn around and say to yourself, well, what am I going to do during my term of service that's going to make this organization better? As a board, you should always keep the big picture in mind. You want to remember that mission is the #1 obligation of the board, and keep the organization focused on its mission. Finances, important as they are always second to the mission. So you never want to be involved in a non-mission related activity just because it raises money. Now, fundraising activities, obviously organizations have things like golf tournaments to raise money. That's not what we're talking about. But we're saying you wouldn't provide services that are not related to your mission because there are people willing to pay for those services. Number 10 of the 10 basic responsibilities, the last basic responsibility of the board is to support the chief executive officer of the organization, whether you call that person the president or the executive director. Supporting the CEO means serving as a resource for him or her. The board should provide moral and professional support whenever they call and reach out to them to check in and see how things are going in between board meetings. I know when I'm out at clients, I frequently hear board members calling in and frequently hear the chief executive calling board members for advice. This is one of the most important things you can do, is to counsel the chief executive in between meetings. Provide constructive feedback to that person, as constructive feedback is very important to the CEO. Board members generally have more business experience than nonprofit CEOs, especially in business areas. As a board, you should create written goals and objectives for the CEO and provide a formal evaluation at least once a year where you evaluate the CEO performance against the previously agreed upon goals and objectives. Now we'll spend a little bit of time on individual board member responsibilities. Obviously, the board will function well if the individuals on the board are doing their individual jobs. Some of these responsibilities that we've identified as individual board member responsibilities are the same as those of the board as an entity, but some are unique to the individual. Performing your duties responsibly, suggesting new board members, serving in leadership positions are all individual traits of a good board member. Certainly, bringing a sense of humor and goodwill to each board meeting adds to the smooth functioning of the board. Being prepared for meetings cannot be overemphasized. When you are prepared, you will perform the most important board role, that of asking timely and substantive questions. Of course, to be prepared at board meetings, you have to get the board material in advance. Excuse me, I suggest that organizations make it a policy to deliver board meeting materials to the board members in time so that the board member has the weekend before the scheduled meeting to prepare. So even if you're having a board meeting on a Thursday, you'd like to have the materials get to the board the previous Friday so that the board member has the weekend before the Thursday meeting to review the materials. I think it is asking too much of a board member if they receive materials on Monday or Tuesday and they only have Tuesday evening and Wednesday evening before the Thursday board meeting to review the materials. But if you give the board member the weekend to review the materials, then there's a higher probability the person will find time to review the materials prior to the board meeting. Confidentiality. Remember that what goes on in a board meeting is confidential, and regardless of how you voted, you must support the majority decision. The majority decision becomes your decision regardless of how you voted. So imagine if you were a member of a football team and in the huddle the quarterback says, does anybody have any ideas? And you suggest a running play and somebody else suggests a pass play and the quarterback decides on a pass play. Well, and then the other people, the majority, agree that what we should do is a passing play. It would not be productive if you disagreed and decided to perform your job as if it was a running play when in fact it is a passing play. Also, it is not in your best interest, it's not in the team's best interest, if after the play is run, and especially if it's not successful, you turn around and say, well, I didn't vote for that kind of a play anyway, I thought we should have had a running play. So when the board takes a vote, and even if that item passes by a 5-4 or 9-8 or whatever it is, majority, the majority is the rule, and the board will do, the organization will commence the activity as determined by the majority, and everybody must support that. And that becomes a, instead of a 9-8 decision, it becomes a 17-0 decision because the decision is made and the organization will go forward. So supporting the majority decision and maintaining confidentiality is very important as an individual board member. Another thing that's important as a board member is to suggest items for the agenda, so that if there are items that you believe should be brought up and discussed at a board meeting, don't hesitate to contact the chair of the board and suggest that this item be put on the agenda for discussion at the next meeting. As a board member, you want to avoid special interests so that you can serve the organization as a whole. You want to maintain your independence in fact and appearance, and you always want to be objective in your decisions. As an individual board member, you want to gain an understanding of the organization's finances and exercise prudence in all financial matters. This does not mean that you should be so conservative so as to hurt the organization. It is a balancing act. One of my clients has a small endowment fund, and I noticed that the investment decisions of the board regarding the endowment fund were extremely conservative. They were investing very little of the money in equity securities and investing the majority of the money in the endowment in treasury bills and certificates of deposit, paying a fixed income amount. Yet I knew certain individuals on the board and knew that in their personal pension plans, in their 401k plans, they were investing heavily in equity securities and investing only minimally in fixed income. And I asked board members, well, why are you so conservative when it comes to this organization? If you believe in your own personal 401k that you're making the proper investment decision to be 60 or 70% in equities and 30% in fixed income, why are you 20% in equities in this nonprofit organization and 80% in fixed income? And the response I received when I asked this question was that the board felt that they had a higher responsibility to not lose any of the nonprofit organization's money in aggressive investing. And I said, well, are you unconcerned about losing your 401k money before you retire? And they said, oh no, I'm very concerned about that. But yet you're investing 70% in equities. And they said, well, that's what I believe we need to keep pace with inflation and make money. Well, if that's what they believe, why are they doing something different when it comes to the nonprofit organization? As a matter of fact, given that a nonprofit endowment is designed to live in perpetuity, the items are permanently restricted in perpetuity, one could argue that they could be 100% in equities because they never have to spend the principal the way a person has to spend the principal, live off the principal of their 401k plan. So I think from my experience that there is a tendency for board members of nonprofit organizations to see this responsibility of exercising prudence and become overly conservative. What you need to do is to hire or obtain the counsel of a good investment manager and learn what a prudent investor does as opposed to an overly conservative investor. Those two terms are not synonymous, conservatism and prudence. Well, this brings us to a close of this first KLR webinar, and you can reach me at the above email address or phone number if I did not get to your question today, or if you have a question in the future. I want to thank you for attending this webinar. Our next one is scheduled for Thursday, October 20th, and we will be opening registration for that webinar any day now on the KLR website. For my fellow CPAs attending today, if you would like to receive continuing professional education credit, send me an email and I will send you out an evaluation form, as that is one of the requirements for a CPE session. And then when I receive the evaluation, I will send you a CPE certificate for 1 hour of continuing professional education credit. For a copy of today's webinar materials, please visit the KLR website. And for a short time, I'm also making one of our client information bulletins entitled Before You Join a Board, available on the KLR website. My producer, Ashley, just told me that these items will be available on Friday at the KLR website. So enjoy the rest of your day, and thank you for attending the seminar.